time. So I'm going to get started. Bryn, if you don't mind letting people in from the waiting room, and I'll go ahead. Thanks. Well, good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name's Jen Miroff, Chair of the Legislative Action Committee for the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts. And on behalf of the League, Executive Director Celia Canavan and Board Presidents Courtney Rao Rogers and Courtney Henderson, welcome to Advocating for Effective Packaging Producer Responsibility Policy. We are honored to host Claire Galkowski, Executive Director of the South Shore Recycling Cooperative, the ultimate expert on this topic. Claire will brief us for about 20 to 25 minutes and then take your questions via the chat. Special thanks to LWV Salem for recommending this event and for their co-sponsorship. Shout out to Tricia Arrington of LWV Salem for her work on this event, as well as her commitment to reducing waste in the Commonwealth. This program is being recorded, and the recording and slides will be shared and posted tomorrow. Let's review our community norms. Be respectful, assume positive intent, bring your full self and limit distractions. Please stay muted during Claire's presentation. Hold your questions to the Q&A section when you're welcome to ask questions via the chat, and you can message staff with private comments and concerns. Now let's introduce Claire. Since 1988, Claire Galkowski has served as the Executive Director of the South Shore Recycling Cooperative, a government organization that provides recycling, solid waste, and hazardous waste program assistance to 18 member towns. Prior to that, she ran a microbiology teaching lab at MIT. A lifelong waste hater, parenthood sparked her concern about our unsustainable waste practices. Her volunteer work led to a position as Boston's Recycling Block Captain Coordinator and ultimately to being hired by the SSRC. Claire served on the board of Mass Recycle for 10 years and as president from 2005 to 2007. She now serves as an advisor on the Mass Product Stewardship Council, a branch of Mass Recycle. Claire is also a longtime leaguer and led the Westwood Walpole Dedham chapter of the LWV in the early 2020s. She lives in Westwood with her husband and cat. Welcome and thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Jen. I am likewise honored to have been invited to talk about this topic that is so near and dear to my heart. Packaging and paper producer responsibility. I am just delighted to be here, and I'm going to start sharing my screen right now because I can ramble on forever. Don't let me do that. In fact, I'm going to set my timer now so I know when I'm at the approximate halfway point. All right. Sure I'm in the right screen. This is not the right screen. Okay, let me try that again. Share. Here we go. All right. There we go. Right, so I'm going to start out. Why won't this advance? All right. So I am going to start by framing the problem. We have a disposal capacity crisis here in Massachusetts, which is driven by consumption. So we all love to buy stuff, and we seem to be buying more and more stuff all the time. At this point, the amount of trash that we generate here in Massachusetts is about 6.2 million tons per year, and this is not showing up right here. Hang on. Oh, jeez. Hang on a second. We only have capacity, which somehow got obscured by the picture. We only have capacity for about 3.5 million tons per year. So we're generating almost twice as much trash as we can manage within our state. So what happens to all that extra trash? It's being exported out of state, some of it as far away as Alabama, because there's the whole region, the whole New England Northeast region is, we're all in the same boat. We're all generating more stuff than we can manage in our own states. Of all that trash, well over 1 million tons per year is paper and packaging. And that's double what we're putting into our recycling bins. So that means most of the recyclable materials that we're using and the materials that are covered in this bill are ending up in the trash. This is not good. And in the past several years, our trash and recycling costs have doubled, partly because of the shrinking capacity. You may remember a few years ago, we had a situation where we had been shipping a lot of our recyclables to China, and a lot of it was messy, it was contaminated, it was loaded with trash, and they couldn't really deal with it. It was polluting their area. So the government clamped down and said no more single stream recycling, no more recyclables of, most of what the households generate can come to us. And a lot of what we were recycling was going there. So that put us into a real bind, and we had to do a better job of sorting our stuff out. The costs for recycling went up quite a lot, and the value went down. So we need to do a better job of resorting our stuff and capturing our stuff, because we're all paying for it through our trash fees. Like if you subscribe to a private hauler, you're paying higher fees than you were 5 years ago. Some of us live in towns where it's in the tax base, the taxes are going up. Towns that charge fees to cover the costs are raising their costs by a lot. So we're all paying for this. And overall, the system is inefficient and ineffective, and it's costing a lot of money. So another aspect to the problem is that the products that we consume, we think about what happens after we dispose of them, but the worst pollution happens before it even gets on the store shelf during the manufacturing process. If we only just look at the greenhouse gas emissions, never mind the other kind of destructive things that happen to make our products, the gases that are generated from the energy that's required to mine and purify and manufacture, transport our materials far outweighs the weight of the materials themselves. And it's something that we don't see because it's invisible. It's just going up into the atmosphere. A lot of it is generated outside our state borders, so that, because we're importing a lot of it, so it doesn't show up in our greenhouse gas inventories. But when you look at a holistic view that incorporates the upstream emissions of what we're consuming into a greenhouse gas inventory, you find that it's on par with auto emissions. It's about 30% plus of our total carbon footprint is just our consumer products. In 2020, the Solid Waste Master Plan, which was developed by Mass DEP, it evaluates how much capacity we have to manage our own trash, what's being trashed, what's being recycled. So they do a study every 10 years and make recommendations. And the recommendations for the 2020 to 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan were that we should try to cut our disposal tonnage by 30% within 10 years and by 90% by 2050. We're not going in that direction at all. We're going either level or up. We've actually been creeping up with our disposal tonnages since 2020. We can't just deal with it at the tail end of the problem. They have specific recommendations for particular materials that should be reduced, and paper and packaging are heavily targeted because they're seen as kind of low-hanging fruits, and so much of what we're generating and throwing in the trash could be theoretically diverted to recycling or reduced. Reduce, reuse, recycle. I've been in this business for over 30 years, and I learned early on that trying to make change at the consumer level through consumer education and outreach is really ineffective. we don't have the kind of budget on expertise that the product manufacturers have to, I mean, they can sell us bottles of water. 40 years ago, when they started selling bottled water, I'm like, who would pay for water? That's ridiculous. Well, now look at how much bottled water there is. And that is what's putting us into this crisis. Is producers are bringing more and more convenient products on the market. They know how to sell it to us. We're buying it. And, you know, the people who are dealing with the trash end of it, we really just don't have the wherewithal to manage it. We need policies that go to the source of the problem. Oops. So back to the greenhouse gas emissions. I just wanted to point out, just using paper as an example, we're all familiar with copy paper. So for every ream of copy paper that's made from trees that we consume, there is 40 pounds approximately. Then there's different studies will tell you different numbers, but they're all kind of in the ballpark. Roughly 40 pounds of carbon dioxide from using one ream of virgin paper. So let's buy recycled paper. Isn't that going to solve our problem? Well, actually, that has a footprint too, because recycling is an industrial process. And, you know, the material has to be picked up at the curb, brought to the facility, sorted out, baled up, shipped out to a processor, and then there's a lot of stuff that goes into processing it into new paper. So for every ream of 100% recycled paper, you even have a big carbon footprint of about 15 pounds. And that's all based on the EPA WARM model. So I just because I'm sure that most of the people here are concerned about that. So consumption is a climate issue. So several years ago, we started thinking about, we being people on the national level that are in the recycling business, thinking we need to do something that's what other countries are already doing. And that's putting some of the responsibility for managing all these products at the end of life on the producers who are putting them on the market in the first place. And that's the core tenet of extended producer responsibility, is that the producers of the materials that are selling it and making profits have to have some skin in the game as far as what happens to it at the end of its life. So if you have an effective bill, it will reduce wasteful, non-recyclable, and unnecessary packaging. And we've all seen these little things that come in these big boxes. There's a lot of waste there. And this program and the bill that I will be talking about has these elements in it. It will create financial incentives that companies can use, that will incentivize companies to use more sustainable materials, including recyclability, recycled content, and several other attributes we'll talk about later. It also provides free recycling to all Massachusetts residents. And when I say free recycling, I'm talking about the processing end of it, not the collection end of it. It will cover people in apartments, dormitories, assisted living facilities. We're missing a lot of material because a lot of residences don't have access to recycling. It also will cover small businesses because it also reimburses the haulers, the private haulers, for certain types of customers. A good bill, such as the one that we have proposed, will save local governments money by reimbursing their costs to run recycling programs. Because we're paying, a big town pays, well over $1 million for recycling each year. And most of that is passed on to the taxpayers or the ratepayers. Mass businesses will have more access to more material because there should be more material coming into the system that's being diverted from the landfills. And it will cut greenhouse gas emissions from manufacturing by incentivizing reduction and reuse as well as recycling. So what's Massachusetts doing about it? Last session, in the last legislative session, you may recall there was a climate bill passed, which the League of Women Voters had a big hand in promoting and advocating for. And part of that bill was the creation of an extended producer responsibility commission to explore policy details around producer responsibility systems for various products. So the Mass DEP is now running this commission. They were put in charge of it, and they're tasked with bringing recommendations for policies to the general court by January. There is a group of 21 stakeholders, 3 of whom are associated with the Mass Product Stewardship Council, which represents mainly municipal interests, but we're all environmentalists as well. The materials that they're covering are paint, mattresses, batteries, electronics, and plastics and packaging. And as I mentioned, the reports will be due middle of January, but they've already got a couple of them just about ready to go. There are also 2 bills in the legislature that have both been filed by Senator Sal DiDomenico. He represents Cambridge and a few other towns in that area. One of them, I'm going to talk about S571 first, which is the big, giant packaging and paper producer responsibility bill. And okay, I'm already halfway through. I better start talking a little faster. And S570 establishes a needs assessment, which is like the first step, one of the first steps in establishing a packaging and paper program. So S571 would work as follows. Companies, as I mentioned, I'm not going to dwell too much on this. If you produce, sell into the state, any packaged goods or printed paper, magazines, things like that, you have to pay the cost to recycle those materials. To enable that, Mass DEP will select an independent packaging reduction organization, which is a nonprofit organization, and there are a couple that are operating now on the continent. And they're the ones who have to kind of corral all the producers, which there's a lot of them, and get them to report what each company is producing in. They collect the fees, they deal with Mass DEP, they report on the program, and the companies have to pay the fees to the PRO, which then disperses the funds to the recipients. So the recipients would be local governments and private haulers, and it would reimburse them for the costs to recycle the materials from residents, schools, K through university, small businesses, and hospitality venues. So this is a pretty big chunk of the generators in the state. The PRO also has to pay for and establish consumer education. See, they know how to do it, we don't. And also infrastructure improvements to help manage some of the materials that are currently difficult to sort out. And they also have to pay for the government oversight by Mass DEP. There's also an advisory committee which oversees the PRO and works with Mass DEP on setting fees, a toxics list, and enforces the requirements. So there are a lot of nuts and bolts to this, and I'm not going to cover them all because we'll be here all night. But I just wanted to show you the list of all the little things that have to go into creating this kind of a system, and I'm going to cover the ones that are highlighted: covered materials, the needs assessment, and fee setting. But as you can see, there are a lot of other aspects to setting up a program like this. This is what a flow chart looks like. I said, how is this thing going to work? So I went through the legislation and I put together this flow chart just to try to figure out how everything fit together. Definitely not going through all these details, but it just kind of illustrates how complicated this can be. But other states are doing it, and we can too. For this reason, it's hard to get anything passed in Massachusetts, as you know, and this is a big deal. So a couple of other states decided to pull out the needs assessment, which we did this session too. So I took the needs assessment out of the bill and fancied it up a bit, made it a standalone bill. So that is what S570 what 570 is just the needs assessment, because you need that. You need to know where you're at now and what you need to do to reach your goals before you can really set up a good program. So covered materials. So it's packaging and printed paper. So the packaging covers non-durable packages for any products offered for sale in Massachusetts, including the Amazon boxes, takeout food. It covers a pretty broad set of materials, which is, and the printed paper is a very large part of our waste and recycling stream. Flyers, magazines, greeting cards, a lot of the stuff that comes into your mailbox, much of which we don't really want. I sometimes go to the mailbox and say, I'm gonna go out and bring in the recycling. It's over 40% of our total trash and recycling streams is covered under this bill. Now, fee setting is the mechanism that will help to reduce the volume and improve the quality of the material so that, you know, it can be recycled, it can be reused. So the thing called, so they first of all set fees based on each material category, which are fairly broad, like paper. DEP would decide what the material categories are. It probably would be a little finer than paper. I can't remember off the top of my head how detailed they were, but there's probably, you know, 30 categories of materials. But then within those categories, backing up, because each type of material has different management costs and values. So to set the fees, you want it to be specific to the types of materials, like for instance, glass. That has a negative value in the recycling stream. It causes problems. It also has a very high environmental footprint in its manufacture. So that, and it's heavy. So that would have a higher fee than, say, you know, aluminum. And then beyond that, there's a thing called eco-modulation, which is kind of fine-tuning each material category, and they get kind of credit for if they reduce, well, material reduction, they would pay less fee because it's based on the tonnage. If it's reusable, then it becomes exempt if it meets certain criteria. Minimal life cycle impact. Recyclability would get, if it's like a single material that's easily recyclable, it gets credit for that. If it's got post-consumer recycled content. And there's incentives and requirements to reduce the toxic substances, because a lot of our materials, you know, PFAS is a prime example of that. And it also incentivizes processing domestically rather than exporting materials, where we have less control over what happens to them. The needs assessment is what's needed to establish a current baseline. So we need to know where we're at now. And the state has already done a lot of work on that. We've got waste composition studies for all of our waste to energy facilities over the past many years. Every 3 years, they tear apart a whole bunch of loads and figure out what's in our trash. That's how we know that we have 1.2 million tons a year of recyclables in our trash. And it also figures out how much of our recycling is being recycled. There's audits involved. And then from there, it determines what would be needed to achieve the goals, as I mentioned in the solid waste master plan, and also for better waste ban compliance. So we have things called waste bans in Massachusetts, where if a load comes into a disposal facility with like a lot of cardboard in it, or any other material that's waste banned, which is all recyclable materials, they get dinged. They get a notice of noncompliance, and if they offend too many times, they get a fine. They might get their load rejected from the disposal facility and have to go pull out all the good stuff, and then they can come back with the trash. So the needs assessment assesses all these things that are in the list here, which I've spent too much time already, so you've probably all read them. But it looks at all these different aspects of how a program should look. We have similar programs in our neighboring state of Maine, and 6 other states have already enacted this type of legislation. And some of them, they're all in different stages of implementation, but a few of the states are just starting to implement the actual programs now. It takes a long time to ramp up. There are also a number of states, including Massachusetts, that have proposed legislation. And the state of Illinois was which inspired me to do the needs assessment, because they passed a needs assessment law that commissioned a needs assessment, and now they're trying to get the full packaging bill enacted. A lot of other countries have had these systems in place for a long time, some for decades. So we know that they can work. We know that producers can manage them. We know that they reduce the amount of waste that's generated. So will Massachusetts be next? So now that everybody's all fired up about getting a program like this in place in Massachusetts, how can we get there from here? Now, we've had this type of legislation. This is the 4th session that we've had packaging and paper producer responsibility legislation in the legislature. And if you've worked with the legislature, you know that it takes multiple sessions to get anything done, generally. So we're going to keep on plugging. But what you can do is you can send comments to the EPR Commission, and there's a link there that will put you into their page. I created a bit.ly link for you. So that should be easy for you to remember. bit.ly/EPR comments, EPR Commission comments. And that's for the EPR Commission. Now, to get the bills moving along, you can email and call your legislators. We don't have a lot of sponsors, but if they sponsored it, please thank them and ask them to convey their support for those 2 bills, S570 and S571, to Senate Ways and Means Committee right now, because that's where the bills are. And the League and I have been working on template letters, which will be available, and Tricia will talk about that in a little while. Ongoing, I do my own action alerts, and the League does as well. If you want to sign up for the ones that I send out, there's a bit.ly link for you right there. And I have a whole page that has summary sheets, bill numbers, sponsors, testimony on my advocacy page, the SSRC's advocacy page, which I run. So bit.ly SSRC advocacy is how you can get there if you want to learn more about these bills. And the Mass Product Stewardship Council is who I work with. We're statewide, and we have bi-monthly meetings that's open to members of Mass Recycle. And if you want to learn more about the Mass Product Stewardship Council and how to join Mass Recycle, you can go to that bit.ly link. Okay, and that's it. Did I finish in time? I did. How about that? I am impressed. So thank you for all your attention, and I assume everybody's still awake. And I'm going to turn it over to Tricia now.
Thank you, Claire. So I think we were gonna go over the action steps, but you just did that. So I'll do that again at the end, but let's start taking some questions. Before we do that, I just wanted to say that if you're not a member of the League of Women Voters and you are interested in joining, we're going to put a link in the chat with more information on how to join and to see if there's a local league in your area. So check the chat for that if you're interested. So the first question, and if you have any questions, just please drop them in the chat. The first question that we have is, how do you in Massachusetts regulate national and international packaging companies, Amazon or not?
That is a really good question, and that's deep in the bill. It's a challenge. There's no doubt about it. but it's the PRO's job to get all those companies to report what is being sold into the state of Massachusetts, and there's going to be reports required annually on that. And they're already doing it in California and I believe Colorado. I'm sure it's very challenging, but it's not impossible. And that's the best detail I can give you right now. I'd have to go into the legislation because I know there's verbiage about that, but that's an excellent question. Did I answer it satisfactorily?
So the next question is, could you talk about how legislation can reduce as well as recycle?
Well, the main driver for reduction is that the fees are based on the tonnage of packaging that each producer uses and sells into the state. So that's the first and biggest incentive for reducing waste. There is also some language in there about reuse, and they get credit for using reusable systems. And off the top of my head, geez, I can't remember what the exact details on. I don't think there are specific goals for reuse in this bill. We could put it into the next iteration, but there are definitely, they would be exempt. If a company went to a reusable system, that material would be exempt if it meets certain criteria for how many times it's reused, and that sort of thing.
How do we convince product manufacturers to stop using foil on cardboard packaging, stop using foil on greeting cards, etc.?
Oh, wouldn't that be lovely? That's a really good question. Foil and lithium batteries and sparkles, yeah, those are all not compatible with recycling. And that would be disincentivized on the eco-modulation through the recyclability. There is also incentive for using single material packaging rather than multiple layers, because as the person who asked the question obviously knows, when different layers are stuck together, even if each layer is recyclable by itself, if it's stuck together, they can't recycle it because who's going to pull it apart? Even with milk cartons, it's technically feasible to separate the plastic coating from the fiber that's inside, but it's an extra step, and it has to be bailed separately, go to a separate facility. So there'd be a higher cost for companies to continue to use that rather than something that's more less impactful. For instance, a number 2 plastic, which has a high value, is easily recyclable, has a fairly low environmental footprint, believe it or not. And I know this is probably heresy to some of you, but plastic is a very efficient packaging material, and as long as it's managed properly, it has less environmental impact than the things like glass and paper that are considered more natural. But that's a whole topic unto itself, and I'm happy to take more questions about that if you want.
It's a little heartbreaking for some of us that glass is not as wonderful as we would like it to be.
Glass is terrible. Glass is like the worst material there is. If you think about it, you have to heat it up to 3,000 degrees to make glass after you've mined the sand, and it doesn't have toxic materials in it per se, but the energy that it takes to manufacture it and to transport it, because it's heavy and it's not space efficient, and yeah, it's a problem material in the recycling stream for sure.
Okay, so the next question is, Claire, if you could speak to how an effective EPR law will keep up with packaging as it changes over time, for example, film and flexible packaging.
Excellent question. This program requires reporting to DEP and reevaluation and updating of the program every, I think it's 5 years. So yes, things will definitely change. And I think it's every year the DEP would reevaluate the recyclability, because recyclability is, there'd be a list of readily recycled materials. That's one of the elements of the bill. And that's an ever-changing thing. You know, there could come a time when, say, black plastic containers, they will have the ability to sort them out, and then it would go from a non-recyclable to a readily recyclable material. Flexible packaging, there's a lot of work going on that as well, to make it more recyclable. But as I showed you earlier in these slides, recyclability isn't really, I mean, recycling is an industrial process. So if your material requires a lot of energy to recycle, but doesn't require a lot of energy to manufacture in the first place, such as flexible packaging. Flexible packaging is a fairly low impact material. So that would have to, well, I'm not answering the question now. My brain is going in different directions here. There are mechanisms to adjust the fee structure. There's also a part of the bill called Alternative Collection Program. So for instance, if the flexible packaging industry were to set up its own collection system, because right now you can't sort them out, they're too small. Most flexible packages can't be sorted at a single stream recycling facility. So that's one of the main reasons it's not recyclable. So they have the ability to set up an alternative collection program. The bar is very high for them to be able to do that, and end up, I don't think they become exempt. They end up paying a different fee. I'd have to look at that again, because the bar is so high, it's probably unlikely that that's going to be feasible for a lot of materials. But to the question, yes, the landscape does change as far as what is recyclable and what isn't, and that is addressed in the bill.
Since you just mentioned black plastic, we have a question. I've heard that black plastic is not recyclable. Is that true, and why?
Right now, it is not. Right now, black plastic is dyed with a thing called carbon black, which is very cheap. And you know, it's attractive, especially if they're using a recycled colored plastic, because the colored plastics, when you recycle them, if you can't get the dyes out, which is very hard to do in a mechanical recycling system, it turns out to be this muddy shade of gray. And so dyeing it black is a good way to recycle it. However, right now, when they're sorting out the plastics, they use these things in the sorting facilities called optical sorters, which shoot laser beams and see what bounces back. I'm pretty sure that's how the optical sorters work. And the black, carbon black, absorbs it and it's invisible. So it can't be distinguished from the conveyor belt that it's coming down on. So it ends up in the trash. And that's why it's not currently recyclable. They're working hard on technology to be able to be able to detect it and send it into the right bale. And that there's also efforts to change the type of dye that is used, but the alternatives are a little more expensive. So that's why it's a tough sell. So does that answer the question? If anyone needs clarification, if I'm not answering questions, I hope they'll re-ask.
I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing somebody. Why do you think the amount of trash has not gone down much, even though the state has enacted various waste bans?
Because we all like to buy stuff. And, you know, there's been a lot of lightweighting, which has helped prevent it from going up faster than it has. You know, a lot of our packaging has gotten lighter, and our products as well. Think about technology. We have one phone now instead of, several different devices that used to do the work of one phone. But, we like to buy stuff. It's too easy to buy stuff. It's very easy to go online and order stuff, and people, it gives people an endorphin rush. I was at a conference the other day, Northeast Recycling Council, where that was discussed. We all get this, an endorphin rush when we buy something. It's just something that's in our human nature. And having more accessibility to more stuff, and, more places where the producers pitch things to us. Oh, I want that shiny new object. And, that's why, that's my feeling as to why it's gone up. There's just more and more stuff coming on the market. There's more desire to sell stuff. It's the dollar is driving consumption.
Do European countries produce less layered paper packaging? Do you know?
I don't know the exact answer to that, but I suspect the answer is yes. I know that in England, just anecdotally, they don't sell milk in the paper cartons. They get sold in these bags, these plastic bags that when you take it home and then you pour it into your reusable pitcher. And, if you look at a life cycle assessment, that is, even if the pouch, I don't know if that's recyclable or not, but even if it isn't, the overall environmental impact is a bit less than packaging it in a carton. And in Canada, one of the pictures I have on, I think it's on one of our summary sheets, is, how we buy toothpaste and it comes in cardboard boxes? Well, they don't do that in Canada because they have to pay for the fee on recycling the cardboard box. So they put a bigger cap on the end of the tube and they get sold loose in these plastic trays that hold them up. So those are two examples of how a packaging producer responsibility law with the proper incentives in it can reduce packaging. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. So.
We have two questions related to flexible plastic and plastic bags. So I'll just read them together, I guess. I bring my plastic bags and bubble wrap to our local supermarket, which claims these materials are recycled, yet no one at the store or corporate headquarters can actually tell me where these materials go. Do you have any sense about where this packaging ends up? And then someone else is asking the same question or a similar question. When I bring flexible plastic to the grocery store to recycle, does it actually get recycled or is it thrown away?
Well, I can't attest to whether they're actually doing it. I have heard rumors that at least certain grocery store chains are not recycling them, but I have actually pushed them on that, and they have insisted that it goes to Trex down in, I believe it's South Carolina, where it's remanufactured into composite decking material, plastic lumber. So, I mean, it has some value, so it wouldn't really make economic sense for them to throw it away when they can potentially get rid of it for free. I don't know what the economics are as far as, the balance with the shipping costs and everything. But I know that several supermarket chains backhaul those containers to their warehouse where they bale them, so it's much more efficient to truck them. So they wait till they have a whole truckload before they ship it down to South Carolina. That's the outlet that I know of. I know there's a couple of others too, but I'm not as familiar with those. So the answer is I don't know. You'd have to kind of follow the truck to do a sting operation to find out what the truth is on that. And I have a feeling I know which supermarket chain they're talking about. I assume it's one that is located in Needham. But And I have, and if it is that chain, I have pushed them on it. And, you know, they haven't given me any like weight slips or anything like that to prove to me that they're actually recycling it, but it's,
Our city does a collection for plastic bags. So
really?
yeah, we have a
Wow.
couple of locations throughout the city where you can turn in your plastic bags, and I feel more confident than bringing it to the grocery store by dropping it off at those locations like the library and City Hall. So that's something to look into, I guess, if you're.
I would be very interested to know. I don't have the bandwidth to do that investigation myself, but, yeah, if anybody feels like, you know, doing a, you know, undercover operation, that would be very interesting. But I know Trex does receive a lot of materials from, you know, supermarkets and things, Target, you know, retailers. So that's where their major feedstock comes from.
Okay, so we have another question. Our town just went to single stream recycling in order to save collection costs, but doesn't that lead to more contamination of items that could be recycled?
Absolutely. Single stream recycling has been a disaster, as far as quality of recyclables goes. But it's, you know, it's the way it is. We have to deal with it, you know. I still have a number of towns in my region that have transfer stations where the residents source separate, and that leads to much cleaner material, partly because you know what's supposed to go in there, because that's all that's in there, is just the number 2 plastics, you know, or just the aluminum cans. So yeah, it's unfortunate, and the contamination rates in single stream are around 20%, which makes it, when there's that much trash and unrecyclable material in that, it makes it harder to sort out the recyclable stuff. And this legislation would also address the contamination issue by, number one, incentivizing the use of packaging that is recyclable, so people don't get confused about whether it should go in or whether it shouldn't. And they would also be in charge of doing the outreach about that, which would specify, no, it's not plastic, glass, and metal. It's containers, bottles, and cans. It's not, you know, I think when we went from dual stream to single stream, there became a disconnect, and people started doing what we call wish cycling, which means I think they can figure it out. It looked like it's probably recyclable. And, you know, I've done it too. We all do it. We don't want to throw stuff in the trash. But it's very confusing. And the state, to its credit, Mass DEP has a website, which I would encourage everybody to go to. It's called recyclesmartma.org. recyclesmartma.org. Maybe somebody can type that in for people. And that has information about, you know, what is recyclable, what are the worst things that shouldn't go in, like tanglers, like the plastic bags and coat hangers. And then it has a thing called a Recyclopedia widget where you can type in egg carton, and it will give you a list, you know, paper egg cartons, this, plastic egg cartons, that, and it will tell you what to do with each type of material. Did I just go off on a tangent? Did I answer the question?
Oh, so yeah, a couple of people have put it in the chat. I was just looking for it. So,
Okay.
yes, and we have another question. Please talk more about wish cycling.
Oh, yes. Talk more about wish cycling. All right, don't do it. If you're not sure about it, you know, there's an expression, when in doubt, throw it out. If something doesn't look like it's on the list, if it's not a rigid plastic container that's bigger than your fist, because if it's something small, I have a whole presentation on this. Well, it's a part, how to do recycling right. That's an hour-long presentation right there. It's called from single use to zero waste, what's up with recycling, and I cover how paper is made, and how to recycle, and then how to reduce. I'm focusing mostly on paper, but I do talk about the recycling process, which is a whole topic unto itself.
Are caps recyclable?
Yes, but not if they're loose. If they're loose, they're gonna fall through the cracks. So small items. So, all right, I'll give you a little glimmer onto the recycling talk. So when your stuff gets dumped on the conveyor belt at the recycling facility, they want to shake out the glass. So the glass is all generally broken, but anything that's smaller than 2 inches by 2 inches, 2.5 inches by, like a tennis ball, it's likely to fall through the cracks, and it could end up either in the glass or in the trash. So put the cap back on the bottle, okay, the plastic bottle, and then it will get recycled, because even though it's a different type of plastic than the bottle itself, when they go to recycle it, they do this thing called float sink. So the cap will float and the bottle will sink, and they chop it up into little pieces. So it's a density thing. So they can separate out and recycle the caps as well as the plastic bottle. Did that answer the question?
That's very interesting. I never knew that. So, oh, can you put small plastics inside larger plastics of the same type so it gets processed?
Yes, that's what I do. That's advanced recycling. But make sure that the lid's on tight, because because it's going to get squashed. So if the lid's going to pop off, then everything's going to go out, and then who knows where it's going to end up, all the little stuff. So, but yes, but yeah, make sure it's the same type of plastic though too, because you got your number 5s, and you got your number 2s, and you got your number 1s. So
They all have to be the same number.
they should be the same number.
Great. Any last questions? Oops, let's see. Restaurant takeout containers often have clear tops and black bottoms. Can they reasonably substitute clear plastic for the black, or is the black already made from recycled material, whereas the clear top is virgin plastic?
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer. I assume the black bottoms have recycled content, because that's a good way to to dye the icky color into something that's usable. But I don't actually know the answer to that. And the lids, there aren't enough. We're not capturing enough recycling for there to be a lot of recycled content in anything. I mean, we can recycle content mandate as much as we want, but if there's not enough supply for them if they're not getting back everything they're putting out, they can't put a lot of recycled content into the new products. And right now we're barely capturing a third of it, and there are losses in the process too. So you're not really getting a third of it even, because things get washed out of the system. There's what you call shrinkage. Paper and plastic both have a shrinkage issue, where a good 10% of the product gets broken up into small enough fibers that they're too small to be incorporated into a new. They get lost in the wash water, basically. So there's not enough recycled material out there to make a dent in to make for a large recycled content. Also, in the case of PET bottles, the number 1s, the water bottles, a lot of that goes into fabric. So, because the fabric industry buys a lot of it, and it becomes fiberfill, it becomes polyester fabric. So that pulls it away from making it bottle to bottle. I mean, it's still getting made into something. So, some people call it downcycling if it's made into something different. I don't quite understand that. I mean, if you're making it something else useful out of it, that's substituting another virgin material, it's recycling. Whether it's up or down doesn't really matter. It's still recycling. But there's not enough material to go full bottle to bottle on glass or plastic or paper.
So we have 2 last questions, and we'll just stop with that there with the questions. So can you talk more about how legislation in Massachusetts can mandate more responsible packaging by the manufacturers?
This is about it. This is I mean, California has a lot of rules. Getting anything passed in Massachusetts is a huge challenge. So that's why I decided I didn't want to nip away at the edges. I wanted to go for it because, to me, this packaging legislation is the holy grail. You can nip away, can do post-consumer recycled content mandates, which, as I just explained, is very difficult to achieve. You can have labeling requirements. That would be helpful. We currently don't have anything in play that I know of, to get rid of those stupid chasing arrows on the plastics because they're so misleading. Because, unless it's a 1, 2, and 5 container, 3-dimensional container, it's not recyclable. In the practical sense, it might be technically possible to recycle. Almost anything is technically possible to recycle, but it has to be economically feasible. Recycling is a business. It's not a religion. It might be for us, but but it's not, it's a business. They have to make money, and there have to be markets for these things, and the process to convert them from a product into feedstock to make new products is can be a challenge for certain materials. When you couple that with the lack of government subsidies, whereas you have government subsidies for mining, for fossil fuels, because they're allowed to pump on public lands, we're not on a level playing field at all. So as far as state initiatives go, I'm going off on a tangent again. I apologize. We have not pursued other initiatives that I can think of. The bottle bill is the one thing which, I beat my head against the wall with Lana Zamaro, who is a former legislative specialist for the environmental stuff with the league, on the bottle bill for 15 years, and they're still trying to get it passed. 25 years later, we've been trying to update this bottle bill, and nothing's happened. It's still the same form as it was in 1983 with the same deposit. So that's why I haven't pursued other legislation regarding packaging stuff.
Yeah, and that ties into our last question. So the last question is, in past legislative sessions, where has EPR legislation died in Ways and Means? Do you know where the speaker stands on EPR legislation?
I don't. And House Ways and Means and the speaker are probably going to be the biggest hurdles. And we've got to get, Senate Ways and Means they have reported our bill out in the distant past, and other bills that I also work on paint, batteries, mattresses, other things too. This is my main focus though. So I have some hope that it can get out of Senate Ways and Means with enough of push, and hopefully get to the Senate floor. The House is going to be the biggest challenge, and I'm sure there's going to be opposition. That's another reason that I wanted to pull out the needs assessment, because that has a much better chance of passing than the full packaging bill, which is going to take a lot of time. And it'll be good to have a few other states having these programs operational as well. Massachusetts doesn't like to be the first at doing things like this. And that's, in this case, it's probably not a bad idea, because there are a lot of kinks that need to be worked out, that are being worked out right now in Oregon and California and Colorado. So that's a roundabout way of saying no, I don't know of other legislation that's going on.
Great. So I'm just going to thank you all for your questions. Thank you, Claire, for all that wonderful information for us. And I'm just going to quickly go over the action steps that you can take if you want to try and get these EPR bills passed. So there are 2 different things that you can do. First, please submit a comment on the EPR Commission's comment portal showing your support for EPR for plastics and packaging. There's a form that you can fill out, and you want to make sure that you check off the box for plastics and packaging, and then you can enter your comment in there. And industry groups have had a strong showing at some of the previous plastics and packaging meetings. So it would be great if we could show that members of the community support EPR programs to counteract some of that negative feedback that the commission has been getting on that. So that's one thing. And then the other thing you can do is to contact your state senator. So if your state senator is a member of the Ways and Means Committee, ask them to support S570 and S571. I'm sorry, to report S570 and S571 favorably out of committee. But if your state senator isn't on the Ways and Means Committee, you can still contact them and ask them to urge their colleagues on Ways and Means to report those bills favorably out of committee. Tomorrow, we'll be sending you an email that will include the slides, a recording of tonight's presentation, along with an action alert that will include a sample email for your state senator and a sample comment to the EPR Commission that you can use as a template and personalize it if you can. So with that, I would like to thank you all for coming tonight and for your interest in EPR legislation. Thank you again to Claire and to the LWVMA for sponsoring this event, and look for an email from us tomorrow. Good night, everyone.